Some weapons were never meant to be abandoned. Elijah Carter, America's most lethal operative, vanished into homelessness, seeking peace in anonymity. His government-sanctioned kills buried in redacted files, his skills dulled by choice. Then Officer Boone and his corrupt squad made their fatal mistake. A beating, a taunt, a homeless man humiliated for sport. They couldn't see the cold calculation behind his eyes, the muscle memory in his steady hands, the precision with which he counted each blow. Now, the predator awakens. As bodies fall, and as the crime lord's empire burns, the truth emerges. Elijah Carter wasn't hiding from the world. He was hiding the world from himself. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Rain poured down in unforgiving sheets, transforming the city into a glistening nightmare of reflective surfaces. The water drummed against the cracked pavement, washing away cigarette butts and forgotten dreams into overflowing storm drains. Huddled beneath the meager protection of a faded awning outside Jerry's 24-hour diner, Elijah Carter sat motionless, seemingly unbothered by the occasional spray that found its way beneath his shelter. His weathered hands were wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The diner's night manager had brought it out of pity, or perhaps fear. Something in Elijah's penetrating gaze made people uncomfortable, made them want to appease him and move along quickly. His tattered military jacket hung loosely from his broad shoulders, the patches and insignias long since removed, but the disciplined posture impossible to erase. The rain created a constant, soothing rhythm that allowed Elijah to focus, to process information like he had been trained to do. Every detail around him registered with crystal clarity. The nervous woman clutching her purse as she hurried past, the man checking over his shoulder 3 times in the span of 30 seconds, the teenage couple sharing an umbrella and giggling as they splashed through puddles. His dark eyes tracked movement automatically, categorizing threats, escape routes, vulnerabilities, old habits. Hard to break. Elijah's fingers twitched slightly as headlights swept across the wet pavement. A patrol car rolled to a stop in front of the diner, its red and blue lights remaining dormant but its presence immediately changing the atmosphere of the quiet street corner. He didn't move, didn't even blink as the doors opened and 4 uniformed officers stepped out into the rain. The lead officer, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut and a permanent sneer etched onto his face, surveyed the street before his eyes landed on Elijah. Something like satisfaction flickered across his features. "Well, well, well," Officer Travis Boone drawled, sauntering toward the homeless man. "Look what we've got here, boys. This spot's not a hotel, old-timer." Elijah remained still, his eyes focused on some distant point beyond the officers. His stillness seemed to irritate Boone, whose hand dropped casually to the baton at his belt. "I'm talking to you," Boone said, his voice hardening. "You deaf or just stupid?" "Neither, sir." Elijah's voice was quiet but clear, each word precisely enunciated. There was no fear in it, no anger, just a flat statement of fact. Boone's eyebrows shot up, and he exchanged glances with his companions. One of them, younger than the others, with an uncomfortable expression on his face, hung back slightly. "Oh, we got a smart one," Boone chuckled. "Reynolds, you hear that? He called me sir." He turned back to Elijah. "What you got in that bag? Booze? Drugs?" "Just personal items," Elijah replied, his gaze finally shifting to meet Boone's. "Nothing illegal." That gaze seemed to unsettle Boone for a moment, something in those dark eyes that didn't match the circumstances, didn't belong to a man living on the streets. They were too alert, too assessing. But the moment passed, and Boone's face hardened again. "Let's see about that." Without warning, he kicked at the weathered duffel bag beside Elijah, sending it skidding across the wet sidewalk. The contents spilled out: a worn toothbrush, a crumpled paperback book, a change of clothes, and a small metal box that clattered against the concrete. Elijah tensed, just slightly, his eyes tracking the metal box. "What's so special about this?" Boone asked, stooping to pick it up. "Personal items," Elijah repeated, rising to his feet in one fluid motion that should have been impossible for a man his age. "Nothing illegal." Boone popped the lid open, revealing a set of dog tags and a faded photograph. "Military man, huh?" he sneered, dangling the dog tags. "What are you now? Just another bum who couldn't hack it in civilian life." For a brief moment, something dangerous flashed in Elijah's eyes, a cold, calculating look that made the younger officer Reynolds take an instinctive step back. "You should put those back," Elijah said quietly. Boone laughed, letting the tags drop into a puddle. "Or what, old man? You gonna fight the whole police department?" Reynolds cleared his throat. "Sarge, maybe we should—" "Shut it, rookie," Boone snapped. "You're here to learn, not talk." He turned back to Elijah. "This sidewalk needs to be cleared. Public safety hazard, you understand?" With a casual swipe of his boot, Boone sent the rest of Elijah's belongings into the gutter, where the rain immediately began carrying them toward the drain. The other officers chuckled, but Reynolds remained silent, watching Elijah with growing unease. Elijah didn't move to retrieve his things. He simply stood there, rain soaking through his jacket, his eyes never leaving Boone's face. There was something in that stillness that should have warned them, the coiled tension of a predator deciding whether to strike. "You deaf again?" Boone asked, prodding Elijah's chest with his baton. "I said move along." "I'm not bothering anyone," Elijah replied evenly. "You're bothering me." Boone jabbed harder with the baton, clearly expecting anger, fear, some reaction that would justify escalation. Instead, Elijah simply looked at him with those penetrating eyes that had seen battlefields and blood, and had calculated distances for kills most men couldn't imagine. It was a look that had made hardened fighters back down, a look that said death was just a calculation away. Something in that gaze finally penetrated Boone's arrogance, making him falter momentarily. But pride and an audience of fellow officers pushed him forward. "That's it," Boone growled, grabbing Elijah's arm. "You're coming in for disturbing the peace." What happened next was so quick that later, when Reynolds tried to describe it in his report, he couldn't quite capture the fluid motion. One moment Boone had his hand on Elijah's arm. The next, he was stumbling backward, off balance, though Elijah hadn't seemed to move at all. "Don't touch me." The words were spoken softly, but they carried the weight of an absolute command. Anger and embarrassment flooded Boone's face. "Take him down!" he barked to the other officers. They rushed forward together, and this time Elijah didn't resist. Perhaps he realized the futility, or perhaps he had already made a different calculation. 4 armed men against 1, with more only a radio call away. Those weren't odds even he would take. Not yet. They dragged him to the wet pavement, one officer wrenching his arms behind his back, while another kicked his legs out from under him. Elijah went down hard, his face scraping against the concrete. Blood mixed with rainwater, running, in pink rivulets down the sidewalk. Through it all, Elijah never made a sound. No grunt of pain, no plea for mercy. He simply closed his eyes and breathed deeply, rhythmically, as if counting. 1, 2, 3. A flash of memory. Sand-colored hills viewed through a scope, the crosshairs settling on a warlord's head from 800 yards away, the gentle exhale as his fingers squeezed the trigger. 4, 5, 6. The officer's mocking laughter echoed oddly in his ears as they hauled him to his feet, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Not so tough now, are you?" Boone sneered, cuffing Elijah's hands behind his back with unnecessary force. 7, 8, 9. They shoved him toward the patrol car, his belongings left scattered and forgotten in the gutter. As they pushed his head down to load him into the back seat, Elijah's eyes met Reynolds'. The young officer looked away quickly, unable to hold that penetrating gaze. "Enjoy jail, old man," Boone laughed, slamming the door shut. In the confined space of the patrol car, Elijah sat perfectly, still, his posture military straight despite the handcuffs. Blood dripped steadily from his face onto his jacket, but he paid it no mind. His eyes stared straight ahead, focused and alert. Reynolds slid into the driver's seat, adjusting the rearview mirror. For a brief moment, he caught Elijah's reflection. Those eyes looking back at him with an intensity that made him quickly avert the mirror. As they pulled away from the curb, Reynolds couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't transporting a homeless vagrant to lockup. The sensation crawling up his spine whispered something much more alarming. He was sharing a confined space with something lethal. The drive to the precinct was silent, the rain drumming on the roof the only sound. As they pulled into the station's parking lot, Elijah spoke for the first time since his arrest. "You should have left me alone." His voice was soft, almost conversational, but there was something in it that made Reynolds' hands tighten on the steering wheel. Not a threat, a warning. Boone, sitting in the passenger seat, just smirked. "Yeah? What are you gonna do about it, tough guy?" Elijah didn't respond. He didn't need to. The smirk on Boone's face was the confident expression of a man who had no idea he'd just made the worst mistake of his life. The holding cell smelled of bleach and despair, an all-too-familiar cocktail that Elijah had encountered in war zones across the world. The gray concrete walls were etched with crude graffiti, names, dates, obscenities, the desperate markings of men trying to leave some trace of themselves behind. Elijah sat on the metal bench, back straight, hands resting on his knees. Blood had dried on his face in flaking ribbons, but he made no move to wipe it away. His eyes remained alert, scanning his surroundings methodically, taking note of the cameras, the guard rotations, the weak points in the cell door. His mind worked, like the weapon it had been honed to be, processing information, calculating odds, planning contingencies. To an observer, he appeared still, almost meditative. Inside, he was anything but. 3 exits from the holding area, 2 guards on night shift, camera blind spot in the northeast corner. Officer Reynolds, uncertain, conflicted, potential leverage. Officer Boone, sadistic, corrupt, primary threat. Elijah's fingers twitched slightly, muscle memory from thousands of trigger pulls. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Not now. Not yet. The precinct hummed with nighttime activity, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, occasional bursts of laughter. Through it all, Elijah waited, patient as the trained hunter he was. Officer Jake Reynolds couldn't shake the uneasiness that had settled over him since they'd brought in the homeless man. Something about him was off. The way he moved, the way he observed everything, the absolute absence of fear in his eyes. Nobody who lived on the streets should have eyes like that. Against his better judgment, Reynolds pulled up the booking system and entered Elijah Carter's fingerprints into the database. Standard procedure, but something told him the results wouldn't be standard at all. The computer processed the request, and Reynolds expected the usual, maybe some minor offenses, vagrancy charges, possibly substance abuse. Instead, a red flag popped up on his screen, classified. Clearance Level 5, required contact Department of Defense. Immediately Reynolds stared at the screen, blood running cold. What the hell? Level 5 clearance was beyond anything he'd ever encountered. Beyond what even the police captain possessed. "What have you got there, rookie?" Boone's voice made Reynolds jump. The sergeant leaned over his shoulder, peering at the screen with narrowed eyes. "I'm not sure," Reynolds said carefully. "The system flagged him. Says we need to contact the DOD. Boone snorted. "Department of Defense? For a homeless bum? System's glitching. Happens all the time." "I don't think." The phone on Reynolds' desk rang, cutting him off. He answered hesitantly. "Officer." "Reynolds." The voice on the other end was crisp, authoritative. "This is Colonel James Briggs, DOD Special Operations Division. You have a man in custody, Elijah Carter. Release him, immediately." Reynolds' stomach dropped. "Sir, This is not a request, officer. That man is not to be detained. Clear his record of tonight's incident and release him. Now." "May I ask, why?" "You may not. This conversation is over." The line went dead. Reynolds slowly replaced the receiver, feeling Boone's expectant stare. "Well?" the sergeant demanded. "That was the DOD," Reynolds said, his voice strangely hollow. "They want us to release him, immediately." Boone laughed. "You're kidding me, right? Some homeless guy has friends at the Pentagon?" "They seemed serious, Sarge. Very serious. It's government red tape," Boone dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Probably some administrative mix-up. He stays put until morning. But..." "That's an order, Reynolds. Drop it." Boone stalked away, leaving Reynolds staring at the phone, wondering what kind of man generated calls from colonels in the middle of the night. In the darkness of the cell, Elijah's mind drifted, not to sleep, but to the calculated recollection of past operations. Memory was a tool, like any other, to be honed and maintained. The jungle canopy of Cambodia, dense and suffocating. Sweat trickling down his spine as he lay motionless for 18 hours, waiting for his target to appear. The gentle pressure of his finger on the trigger, the controlled exhale, the distant spray of red as a terrorist leader's head exploded like a ripe melon at 200 yards. The mountains of Afghanistan, bitter cold numbing his fingertips as he lined up a shot that others had called impossible. 3 Taliban commanders in a moving vehicle, weaving through mountain roads. 3 shots, 3 bodies, 30 seconds. A new long-distance record for kill confirmations. The desert outside Fallujah, sand grinding in his teeth as he provided overwatch for a SEAL team extraction. 12 hostiles eliminated without a single Allied casualty, his rifle barrel so hot it nearly burned his hands. These weren't dreams or nightmares. They were records, data points, evidence of what he was capable of when necessary. And after tonight, it might become necessary again. Morning arrived with harsh fluorescent lights flickering on and a guard banging on the cell bars. "Carter, you're out." Elijah opened his eyes, looking exactly as he had the night before, alert, composed, ready. He stood without a word and followed the guard through the processing area, where a scowling Boone waited with his paperwork. "Looks like you've got friends in high places," Boone said, shoving a plastic bag containing Elijah's few recovered possessions across the desk. "Don't think this changes anything on my streets." Elijah said nothing as he reclaimed his belongings. The metal box with his dog tags was missing, likely still lying in some gutter where Boone had dropped it. His eyes registered this fact without emotion. "Nothing to say?" Boone taunted. "No thank you for the night's accommodation?" Elijah's gaze flicked to Boone's face, then away, dismissing him as unworthy of response. That subtle dismissal infuriated Boone more than any words could have. "This isn't over," the officer hissed. Elijah walked past him toward the exit, where Reynolds stood awkwardly by the door. As he passed the young officer, Elijah paused momentarily. "Choose carefully who you follow," he said quietly, then continued, "On his way." Reynolds watched him go, that uneasy feeling intensifying. The man moved like a predator, every step purposeful, balanced, ready. Not like someone who had spent the night in a cell, but like someone preparing for war. Outside, the morning sun had burned away the rain clouds, leaving the city steaming and humid. Elijah walked steadily away from the precinct, his pace unhurried, but covering ground efficiently. His eyes constantly scanned his surroundings, rooftops, alleyways, parked cars. 3 blocks from the station, he noticed the black SUV idling at a corner. Government issue, tinted windows, 2 men inside watching him with professional interest. Elijah continued past without acknowledging them, but his mind registered their presence, filing it away. He turned down a narrow alley between 2 abandoned warehouses, a shortcut to a homeless camp where he occasionally sought shelter. The alley was empty when he entered it, but his trained senses detected the subtle shifts in air currents as bodies moved into position behind him. 4 men spread in a semicircle blocking his exit. Not police. Their movements were too fluid, too practiced, military training, or close to it. Hired muscle with experience. Elijah continued walking for several more steps before stopping, his back still to the men. "That's far enough," a voice called out. "Mr. Langston wants a word with you." Elijah turned slowly, hands visible at his sides, his expression neutral as he assessed his opponents. 2 carried knives, 1 had brass knuckles, and the 4th, hanging back slightly, had a hand inside his jacket where a shoulder holster would be. "I don't know any Langston," Elijah replied calmly. The apparent leader, a muscular man with a scar running along his jawline, stepped forward. "He knows you, though. Says you caused him a lot of trouble overseas once upon a time." Ah, that clarified things. Victor Langston, former CIA contractor, current arms dealer and human trafficker. Elijah had dismantled one of his operations in Eastern Europe 5 years ago, a sniper shot that had taken out Langston's regional commander and sent the organization into chaos. "I'm not interested in a reunion," Elijah said. "Not really an option," Scar replied, flicking open a switchblade. "You're coming with us, or you're not going anywhere ever again." Elijah's eyes went cold, the last trace of humanity draining from them as combat calculations replaced conscious thought. 4 opponents, limited space, no firearms of his own, acceptable odds. The fight lasted exactly 27 seconds. Later, witnesses would tell responding officers conflicting stories. Some swore there were gunshots. Others insisted the homeless man had help. One woman claimed he moved like something, from a movie, all blurry-like. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. Elijah Carter was the most efficient killing machine the United States military had ever produced, and these men were amateurs by comparison. The first attacker lunged with his knife. Elijah stepped inside the thrust, grabbed the man's wrist and twisted. The sharp crack of breaking bone was followed by a scream as Elijah used the man's own momentum to drive the knife into his thigh, severing the femoral artery. The second man swung his brass knuckles in a wide arc. Elijah ducked under the blow, drove 2 precise strikes to the man's throat, crushing his trachea, then pivoted to face the third attacker. This one was more cautious, circling with his knife held low. Elijah waited, perfectly still, until the man committed to a thrust. Then he moved, a blur of lethal precision, catching the knife hand, breaking the elbow with a short strike, and driving the man's head into the brick wall with enough force to fracture his skull. The fourth man had his gun out now, but hesitated a crucial half-second at the sight of his companions falling so quickly. Elijah closed the distance in 2 strides, trapped the gun hand and fired the weapon into the man's own torso twice before disarming him. 4 attackers. 4 bodies. 27 seconds. Elijah checked the gun, a Glock 19, 3 rounds remaining, and tucked it into his waistband before quickly searching the bodies. He found what he expected. Burner phones. Cash. No identification. Professional enough to maintain anonymity, but not professional enough to survive. He took one of the phones and dialed a number from memory. When it connected, he spoke just 3 words. "They found me." Without waiting for a response, he ended the call, dropped the phone beside one of the bodies, and walked calmly out of the alley. By the time police sirens wailed in the distance, he was already 6 blocks away, merging into the morning crowd of commuters. Officer Boone was halfway through his second coffee of the shift when his personal phone rang. He didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Boone, your homeless guy just killed 3 of my men in under a minute." The voice was cold, controlled, but with an undercurrent of fury. "The 4th won't make it to the hospital." Boone nearly choked on his coffee. "Who is this?" "The man who's been paying your department to look the other way while I do business in your city. And now I learn you've been harassing a ghost, a man the government pretends doesn't exist because what he did for them was too dark to acknowledge. Langston." Boone's voice dropped to a whisper, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "What are you talking about? He's just some bum." "That bum has the highest confirmed kill count in Special Forces history, more than any sniper, any assassin, any black ops specialist they've ever fielded. The kind of weapon they point at problems they want to disappear permanently." Boone's blood ran cold. "What's his real name?" "Elijah Carter is his real name. They never bothered with aliases because no one who saw him in action was left alive to identify him. And now, thanks to you, he's active again. And he's in my city." "I didn't know." "Fix this," Langston snapped. "Find him, kill him, or I'll consider our arrangement terminated, along with your employment." The line went dead. Boone stared at his phone, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead as the realization sank in. He hadn't arrested a homeless vagrant last night. He'd poked a sleeping lion. As the sun began to set over the city skyline, Elijah stood on an abandoned bridge spanning the industrial district. Below him, the river flowed sluggishly, carrying the city's forgotten refuse out to sea. He was no longer in his tattered clothes. A visit to an old contact, a former Marine turned arms dealer who operated out of a pawn shop in the bad part of town, had provided him with fresh attire, a prepaid phone, and a shoulder holster for the Glock. The metal box containing his dog tags remained lost, but it didn't matter now. The man those tags had belonged to, the soldier, the patriot, the believer, was long gone. What remained was something else entirely, a weapon that had been pointed at a target. Elijah's phone buzzed with an incoming text. A single line of text from an unnamed contact. Langston has ordered full surveillance, all assets deployed. So it began. The hunter was now the hunted, or so Langston thought. In truth, Elijah had been hunting all along, waiting for the right moment to spring the trap. Boone and his corrupt officers had simply accelerated the timeline. "I warned you," Elijah murmured to the darkening sky. "I warned you to leave me alone." In the gathering shadows, his eyes gleamed with cold purpose. The forgotten warrior had remembered his purpose. And now, a city would remember his wrath. Victor Langston slammed his fist onto the polished mahogany desk, rattling the crystal tumbler of bourbon beside his laptop. The security footage from the alley played on a loop before him, grainy but clear enough to show 4 of his men being dismantled by a single opponent in less than 30 seconds. "Play it again," he ordered, his voice deceptively calm despite the rage burning behind his eyes. His security chief, Mills, tapped a key, and the footage restarted. Langston leaned forward, studying the homeless man's movements with cold calculation. The efficiency was unmistakable. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just pure lethal intent executed with surgical precision. "Elijah Carter," Langston muttered, the name bitter on his tongue. "I should have killed you years ago." Mills shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, our intelligence says he's been off the grid for 3 years, living on the streets, no contact with his former handlers." "And you believe that?" Langston's laugh was hollow. "Men like Carter don't retire. They don't break. They wait." He pulled up another window on his laptop, revealing a heavily redacted military file. Most of the text was blacked out, but fragments remained visible. "Confirmed kills exceeding classified threshold," and "psychological evaluation indicates subject displays minimal emotional response to combat scenarios." "This man single-handedly collapsed my Eastern European operation," Langston continued, his finger tapping on the screen. "One shot from nearly a mile away. Do you know what it takes to make that kind of shot, Mills? Not just skill, it requires something inhuman. An ability to detach completely, to become nothing but mathematics and physics." Mills studied the footage again, watching as Carter efficiently dispatched the 4th attacker using the man's own weapon. "What do you want us to do, sir?" Langston closed the laptop with a snap. "Find out everything about his movements since he surfaced. I want to know where he sleeps, what he eats, who he talks to, and get Boone on the phone." His incompetence started. "This mess? He can help clean it up." As Mills left the room, Langston turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, a ghost from his past was hunting him. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, it awakened something he hadn't felt in years, the electric thrill of genuine challenge. "Come find me, Carter," he whispered to the city lights below. "Let's finish what we started." Across town, Officer Boone sat in his patrol car, hands shaking as he dialed dispatch for the 3rd time. "Any update on that double homicide in the warehouse district?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Nothing new, Sergeant," the dispatcher replied. "Detective Warren's handling it. 4 bodies, all unidentified. Professional hit, they're saying." "Any suspects?" "Nothing solid. Surveillance cameras in the area were conveniently disabled." Boone ended the call, cold sweat beading on his forehead. 4 bodies, Carter's work. And now Langston expected him to find and eliminate a ghost. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "My office, 1 hour, come alone." L. Langston rarely met with his police contacts in person. Whatever was happening, it was bad enough to break protocol. Boone started the car, his mind racing, through scenarios, none of them ending well for him. Officer Jake Reynolds sat in the evidence room, scrolling through database after database, searching for any trace of Elijah Carter. The man was a phantom, glimpses in military records that led nowhere, redacted files, classified operations with all participants' names removed. "What are you doing, rookie?" Reynolds jumped, quickly minimizing the screen as Boone appeared in the doorway. "Just reviewing some case files, Sarge." Boone's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What case?" "Just trying to understand the system better," Reynolds replied, maintaining eye contact despite his racing heart. Boone stepped closer, his breath sour with coffee and anxiety. "Stay away from the Carter situation. That's an order. You keep digging. You'll find yourself buried." After Boone left, Reynolds reopened his search, more determined than ever. Something was very wrong here, and his gut told him Carter was at the center of it, not as the villain, but as something else entirely. His phone chirped with an alert. A body had been found near the homeless encampment where Carter occasionally stayed, one of Boone's informants, throat cut with military precision. The game was escalating. Elijah knelt in a rented storage unit, assembling a sniper rifle with practiced ease. His movements were methodical, each piece inspected and cleaned before being fitted into place. The ritual calmed him, focusing his mind on the task ahead. His old Marine contact, Wilson, watched from the doorway. "You sure about this, Carter? Langston's got resources, private security, corrupted cops, friends in government." "I'm sure." Elijah's voice was flat as he calibrated the scope. "What changed? You've been off the grid for years. Why now?" Elijah paused, a rare moment of reflection crossing his otherwise impassive features. "They wouldn't leave me alone. Warned them." Wilson nodded slowly. He'd served 2 tours with Elijah before a knee injury forced him into retirement. He'd seen firsthand what happened when someone pushed Elijah Carter too far. "I got what you asked for." Wilson placed a small USB drive on the workbench. "Everything we have on Langston's operation, properties, security details, financial accounts, cost me some serious favors. Appreciated." Elijah pocketed the drive without looking up. "There's something else." Wilson hesitated. "Rumors about his new operation, human trafficking, kids mostly, coming through his port facilities." Elijah's hand stilled momentarily. "Confirmed?" "Enough to make me sick. Started after you took out his weapons pipeline in Europe. Diversification, he calls it." A cold silence filled the storage unit as Elijah processed this information. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a rare edge of emotion. That might have been anger in another man. Then he dies slower than I planned." Wilson suppressed a shiver. He'd heard stories about what Elijah had done to terrorist leaders who targeted civilians, the kind of stories that hardened Special Forces operators told in whispers. "Watch your back," Wilson said, as he turned to leave. "And Carter, good hunting." Alone. Again, Elijah completed the rifle assembly and loaded a single round into the chamber. The first bullet was always symbolic, a promise to himself and to his target. This one was for Boone. The package arrived at the precinct the next morning, addressed to Sergeant Travis Boone. No return address, no postmark. As if it had materialized from thin air. Boone opened it in the break room, his curiosity turning to ice-cold fear as he saw what lay inside. A single .308 caliber bullet, with his badge number etched into the copper jacket. Beneath it, a note with 2 words, "First warning." His hands trembling, Boone pulled out his phone to call Langston, only to find a text already waiting. "My patience is running thin. Find him." Outside the precinct, perched on a rooftop 600 yards away, Elijah observed through his scope as Boone frantically paced the break room, the package open before him. He could have taken the shot then, an easy kill through the window, but that would be too quick, too merciful. Boone needed to understand fear before he died. Real fear. The kind that hollows out your insides and makes every shadow a threat. The kind of fear Elijah had seen in the eyes of men who knew judgment was coming. Packing up his rifle, Elijah melted away from the rooftop, already planning his next move. Langston would be expecting him to target Boone first, which meant security around the crime lord would be lighter than usual. Perfect time for reconnaissance. Langston's downtown office occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper. Its legitimate businesses, investment firms, import-export companies, real estate holdings, providing perfect cover for his more lucrative criminal enterprises. Elijah observed from a construction site across the street, cataloging security measures, guard rotations, and potential access points. The building was a fortress, keycard access, biometric scanners, armed security on each floor. But every fortress had weaknesses. Elijah had breached more heavily guarded compounds during his military career, including a Pakistani warlord's mountain stronghold, protected by over 100 fighters. His phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Wilson. Package delivered to B. L has called in Weiss and his team, arriving tomorrow. Elijah frowned. Marcus Weiss was former Delta Force, dishonorably discharged for excessive force against civilians. Now he led a team of mercenaries who specialized in high-risk extractions and assassinations. They were good. Not as good as Elijah, but dangerous enough to complicate matters. Time was running short. He needed to accelerate his timeline. Movement at the building's entrance caught his attention. A familiar figure emerged. Officer Reynolds, looking nervous as he glanced around before entering the lobby. Interesting. The rookie was either corrupt or investigating on his own. Either way, he might prove useful. Reynolds felt distinctly out of place in the gleaming lobby of Langston Investments. His uniform attracted curious glances from well-dressed employees hurrying to and from elevators. "May I help you, officer?" The receptionist's smile was professional but cold. "I need to speak with Mr. Langston regarding an ongoing investigation," Reynolds stated, projecting more confidence than he felt. "I'm afraid Mr. Langston is in meetings all day. Perhaps you could leave your card." "It's about Elijah Carter." The name dropped like a stone in still water. The receptionist's smile froze, and her hand moved subtly toward what Reynolds assumed was a silent alarm. "1 moment, please." 2 minutes. Later, Reynolds found himself escorted to a private elevator by security guards whose bulging jackets poorly concealed their weapons. The elevator ascended smoothly to the penthouse level, where the doors opened onto a minimalist reception area. A tall, imposing man in an impeccable suit waited there, his expression unreadable. "Officer Reynolds. I understand you have information about our mutual problem." Reynolds swallowed hard, understanding immediately that he was speaking to Langston himself. "Not exactly information, sir. More like questions." Langston's eyes narrowed. "Questions? About why a homeless veteran has half the police force and your private security hunting him. About why my sergeant received a bullet with his badge number this morning. About why 4 men turned up dead in an alley after trying to abduct Carter." A thin smile spread across Langston's face. "Curiosity is an admirable trait in a detective, Officer Reynolds. Less so in a patrol officer who should be following orders." "I became a cop to uphold the law," Reynolds replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Not to participate in whatever this is." "Admirable." Langston stepped closer, but naive. "Do you know what Elijah Carter really is? He's a weapon. A government-sanctioned killer with more confirmed eliminations than any operative in history. The kind of man they send when they don't want prisoners, witnesses, or questions. If that's true, why is he living on the streets?" Langston shrugged. "Who knows? Guilt? Trauma? Or perhaps it's just camouflage. The perfect cover for a man who never really stopped being what they made. Him." Reynolds processed this, remembering Carter's eyes, the cold, assessing gaze that had seen right through him. "What did you do to him?" "I existed in his crosshairs." Langston turned to look out the floor-to-ceiling windows. 5 years ago, Carter eliminated a business associate of mine in Eastern Europe. One shot from over a mile away. "Impossible shot," they said. "Not for him." "And now?" "Now he's decided to finish the job." Langston turned back to Reynolds. "Which puts you at a crossroads, officer. You can help us contain this threat, or you can become collateral damage. Carter won't distinguish between corrupt cops and merely incompetent ones when he starts his killing spree." Reynolds felt cold dread settling in his stomach. What do you want from me? Be my eyes in the department. Report any sightings, any leads on Carter's whereabouts. In return, I ensure your safety when this is over. It was a devil's bargain and Reynolds knew it, but it might also be his only chance to understand what was really happening, and perhaps to prevent a bloodbath. I'll think about it, he said carefully. Don't think too long. Langston nodded to his security. Show Officer Reynolds out. As Reynolds left the building, he failed to notice the homeless man sitting across the street reading a discarded newspaper, failed to see the calculating eyes that tracked his every move, failed to realize he had just been marked as either a potential ally or another obstacle to be eliminated. Rain fell in sheets across the city, turning streets into rushing rivers and drowning out the ambient noise of traffic and pedestrians. Perfect weather for what Elijah had planned. Sergeant Boone huddled in his car outside Langston's downtown club, the Velvet Room, a high-end establishment that served as both a legitimate business and a money-laundering hub. He'd been ordered to meet Langston here. Apparently, the crime lord no longer trusted the security of his office building. Boone's hand instinctively touched the holster under his jacket, reassured by the weight of his service weapon. Not that it would do much good against a ghost like Carter. The man had killed 4 trained enforcers with his bare hands. What chance did a corrupt cop with mediocre range scores have? His phone buzzed with a text. Back entrance, now. Cursing, under his breath, Boone stepped out into the downpour, jogging toward the club's service alley. The rain plastered his hair to his scalp and soaked through his jacket within seconds. The alley was poorly lit, garbage bins overflowing along one wall. A steel door marked "Deliveries Only" stood at the far end, flanked by 2 large men in dark suits despite the late hour. As Boone approached, the men patted him down thoroughly before nodding toward the door. Inside, the service corridor was a stark contrast to the opulent club. Bare concrete, exposed pipes, the distant thump of bass from the main floor. One of the guards led Boone to a freight elevator, then down another corridor to what appeared to be an office converted from a storage room. Langston sat behind a desk, flanked by a tall, scarred man whom Boone recognized as Marcus Weiss, the mercenary commander. You're late, Langston observed coldly. Traffic, Boone muttered, trying to hide his nervousness. Look, about Carter. You've failed to locate him, Langston interrupted. Failed to eliminate him. Failed to be of any use whatsoever in this situation that you created. Boone swallowed hard. I've got the whole department looking for him. We'll find him. Your department couldn't find their own assholes with a map and a flashlight, Weiss drawled, his voice carrying a slight southern accent. My team is here now. We'll handle it. Your team? Boone looked between them. What team? Professional problem solvers, Langston replied. Former special forces, like our friend Carter, but with fewer moral compunctions. What do you need me for, then? Boone asked, not bothering to hide his relief. Langston's smile was cold. Bait. The word hung in the air as Boone processed its implications. No way. You want me to be a target? You already are a target, Langston pointed out. The bullet with your badge number made that clear, but now, instead of running scared, you'll be part of a controlled operation. We'll keep you under surveillance, heavily guarded. When Carter makes his move, Weiss and his team will eliminate him. And if they fail? Boone's voice cracked slightly. They won't, Weiss said confidently. Carter's good, but he's one man. My team specializes in eliminating high-value targets with minimal collateral damage. Boone looked desperately between them. I want out. I'll leave town. Disappear. That's not an option, Langston cut him off. You're in this until it's finished, one way or another. The unspoken threat was clear. If Boone didn't cooperate as bait, he'd find himself in Carter's position, hunted by both sides. Fine, he muttered, shoulders slumping in defeat. What's the plan? Elijah watched the Velvet Room from the rooftop of an adjacent building, the rain running in rivulets down his face. Through his scope, he tracked Boone's arrival, noting the security detail and the obvious tension in the sergeant's body language. So, Langston was setting a trap, predictable. He shifted his position, scanning the surrounding buildings for Vice's team. They would be positioned strategically, high vantage points with overlapping fields of fire, probably with at least one spotter using thermal imaging to counter the rain and darkness. There, a subtle movement on a rooftop 3 buildings north, and another on the parking structure to the east. Professionals, but not quite invisible to someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of remaining unseen. Elijah packed up his rifle without taking a shot. This wasn't the right moment. Weiss would be expecting a direct assault, a sniper, shot, or perhaps a close-quarters ambush. Elijah needed to change the parameters, force them to react rather than act, and for that, he needed leverage. Officer Reynolds sat at his kitchen table, files spread before him as he tried to make sense of the web of connections between Langston, Boone, and the mysterious Elijah Carter. His wife, Sarah, watched worriedly from the doorway, their 3-year-old daughter Emma asleep in her arms. "Jake, it's after midnight," Sarah said softly. "Come to bed." Reynolds rubbed his bloodshot eyes. "Just a little longer. I'm close to something, I can feel it." "Close to what?" "This isn't your case. You're a patrol officer, not a detective." "It's complicated," Reynolds sighed. "Something big is happening, and I think a lot of people are going to get hurt if someone doesn't stop it." Sarah's expression softened. "And that someone has to be you?" "Maybe." Reynolds stared at a satellite image of Langston's port facility. "Or maybe I'm just trying to understand which side I should be on." A noise from outside, subtle, just a soft scrape of metal on concrete, made Reynolds tense. He moved to the window, carefully peering through the blinds. The street appeared empty, glistening with rain under the streetlights. But something felt wrong. "Take Emma to the bedroom," he whispered, reaching for his service weapon. "Lock the door and call 911 if you hear anything." Sarah's eyes widened in fear, but she nodded, clutching their daughter tighter as she retreated down the hallway. Reynolds moved silently to the front door, weapon drawn, heart hammering in his chest. He hadn't told anyone he was investigating Langston and Carter. No one should have any reason to. "Officer Reynolds." The voice came from behind him, impossibly calm and quiet. Reynolds spun, raising his weapon, to find Elijah Carter sitting at his kitchen table, casually examining the files spread there. "How did you—" "Your back door lock is substandard," Elijah replied without looking up. "And you really should have motion sensors installed." Reynolds kept his gun trained on the intruder. "Give me one reason not to shoot you right now." "I could give you several." Elijah finally looked up, his dark eyes unreadable. "Starting with the fact that I mean no harm to you or your family, and ending with the reality that if I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation." A chill ran down Reynolds' spine as he recognized the truth in those words. "What do you want?" "To offer you a choice." Elijah gestured to the files. "You've been investigating, looking for the truth. I respect that." Reynolds slowly lowered his weapon, though he kept it ready. "What truth?" "Langston isn't just a criminal. He's a monster who traffics in human lives. Children mostly, sold to the highest bidder." Elijah's voice remained flat, but something burned in his eyes now. "Boone and others in your department have been on his payroll for years helping to cover up his operation. You expect me to believe a homeless man has this kind of intelligence?" A ghost of a smile touched Elijah's lips. "I was never homeless, Reynolds. Just invisible. It's a useful state when you're gathering information." Reynolds felt the ground shifting beneath him. "What are you?" "Really?" "Someone who was trained to eliminate threats to national security. Someone who discovered that sometimes those threats wear expensive suits and donate to political campaigns." Elijah stood slowly, careful to keep his hands visible. "Langston is planning something big, a shipment coming into his port facility tomorrow night. I need to stop it." "Why tell me this?" "Because Langston is setting a trap for me, using Boone as bait. He's brought in mercenaries, former special forces, to hunt me down." Elijah's gaze was steady. "I'm going to spring that trap, but on my terms, which means I need to create my own distraction. Reynolds stiffened. I'm not helping you kill. Cops, I don't kill cops, Reynolds, only corrupt ones. Elijah moved toward the door. Think about what side you want to be on when this plays out. The storm is coming, whether you're ready or not. Wait. But Elijah was already gone, melting into the rainy night as if he'd never been there at all. Reynolds stared at the space where he had stood, then looked down at his kitchen table. Among his scattered files now lay a USB drive labeled with a single word: evidence. The next evening, Boone sat in his patrol car outside his apartment building, nerves frayed to the breaking point. Weiss's men were supposedly watching from concealed positions nearby, but Boone couldn't spot them, which meant Carter probably couldn't either, right? His radio crackled with a routine call, which he ignored. Acting normal was part of the plan, but responding to calls meant moving around, becoming a harder target to protect. As darkness fell, a message came through on his phone. Stay put. Movement detected on your block. Stand by. Boone's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. Carter was coming for him. Minutes stretched into an agonizing hour. Nothing happened. No shots, no attack, just the quiet residential street with occasional passing cars. Then his radio exploded with urgent calls. All units. Explosion reported at Langston Shipping Terminal, Pier 17. Multiple casualties. Hazmat situation reported. Boone's blood ran cold. Pier 17, Langston's main smuggling hub, where a major shipment was due tonight. His phone rang immediately. Langston's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. It's a diversion. Carter hit the terminal instead of you. Get over there now. But the plan is shot to hell. He's burning my operation to the ground while we're babysitting you. Boone started his car with shaking hands, pulling away from the curb. As he accelerated down the street, his headlights illuminated a figure standing directly in his path. Elijah Carter. Boone slammed on the brakes, reaching for his weapon. But Carter was already moving, faster than seemed possible, closing the distance before Boone could raise his gun. The driver's side window shattered. A hand reached in, grabbing Boone by the throat. I warned you, Carter said, his voice as calm as if he were discussing the weather. Now you're going to help me end this. Boone felt something press against his neck, a needle, and then darkness claimed him. Officer Jake Reynolds stared at the footage playing on his laptop screen, his stomach churning with each new horror. The USB drive Elijah had left contained surveillance video from inside Langston's shipping facilities, children being unloaded from containers like cargo, frightened and disoriented, guided by armed guards into unmarked vans. The timestamp showed. It was from just 3 weeks ago. Sarah stood behind him, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other clutching the doorframe for support. Oh my God, Jake, she whispered. Those poor children. Reynolds paused the video, unable to watch anymore. There's financial records too. Offshore accounts, shell companies, bribes paid to officials. He ran a hand through his hair. Half my precinct is on his payroll. Including Boone? Especially Boone. Reynolds closed the laptop. He's been Langston's inside man for years, redirecting patrols away from shipments, burying evidence, intimidating witnesses. Sarah moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in hers. What are you going to do? The question hung in the air as Reynolds considered his options. Going to internal affairs was the proper procedure, but if Langston's influence extended as far as the evidence suggested, it would be like signing his own death warrant. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. Reynolds, he answered, cautiously. Turn on your TV. Elijah's voice was unmistakable. Channel 7. Reynolds reached for the remote, switching on the news. Helicopter footage showed a massive fire at the port, smoke billowing into the night sky as emergency vehicles swarmed the area. Breaking news, the reporter announced. A major explosion at Langston Shipping's main terminal has authorities scrambling. Initial reports suggest hazardous materials may be involved, with first responders treating multiple casualties. The FBI has been called in amid rumors of potential human trafficking connections. Jesus, Reynolds breathed. You did this? I exposed it, Elijah replied calmly. The explosion was targeted. Storage facilities only, no civilian casualties. But the containers with people were discovered by firefighters. Where's Boone? With me. Safe, for now. There was a pause. I need your answer, Reynolds. Which side are you on? Sarah squeezed his hand, her eyes meeting his. In them, he saw fear, but also resolution. They both knew there was only one choice he could live with. I'm in, Reynolds said firmly. What do you need me to do? Meet me at the abandoned Westlake factory in 1 hour. Come alone and make sure you're not followed. Langston's mercenaries are hunting us both now. The line went dead. Reynolds looked at his wife, the mother of his child, possibly for the last time as the man she'd married. I have to go. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes but determination in her voice. Do what's right. We'll be here when you come back. Reynolds holstered his weapon, kissed his wife, and checked on his sleeping daughter one last time before heading out into the night, praying he wasn't making a fatal mistake. Langston paced the conference room of his secondary office, rage radiating from him in almost palpable waves. The room's other occupants, Marcus Weiss and 4 of his mercenaries, watched warily, knowing better than to speak until addressed. You told me you could handle one man, Langston finally said, his voice deceptively soft. One aging soldier, living on the streets, and yet my shipping terminal is in flames, my operation exposed to the feds, and Carter is still out there. Weiss remained stone-faced. He's not what we expected. The intelligence was flawed. Flawed? Langston laughed, bitterly. I told you exactly what he was capable of. You didn't listen. We underestimated his resources, Weiss admitted. He shouldn't have been able to access that kind of explosives, or the intelligence on your shipping schedule. He has help, one of the other mercenaries suggested. Someone feeding him information. Langston's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening further. Boone's missing. Last seen in his patrol car near his apartment. Carter's got him, Weiss concluded. He's eliminating your assets one by one. Then find him. Langston slammed his fist on the polished table. I'm doubling your fee. Triple if you bring me Carter's head within 24 hours. Weiss nodded to his team, who filed out silently to begin the hunt. When they were alone, Langston fixed Weiss with a cold stare. You were Delta Force with Carter, weren't you, before he transferred to the Ghost program? Weiss tensed slightly. We served together briefly. Then you know how he thinks. Use that. It's not that simple. Carter was already a legend when I met him. The man who made impossible shots, who could infiltrate facilities no one else could breach. Everyone has a weakness, Langston insisted. Weiss considered this, then nodded slowly. He's a protector, at heart. Always was. Even his kills were justified as protecting others. So we find something he wants to protect, Langston mused. Or someone. The rookie cop, Weiss suggested. Reynolds. Carter approached him, tried to turn him. There might be a connection there. Langston's thin lips curved into a cruel smile. Find out everything about Reynolds. Family, friends, weaknesses. If Carter wants to burn my world down, I'll show him what real fire looks like. The Westlake factory had been abandoned for nearly a decade, its cavernous interior now a playground for urban explorers and the occasional homeless encampment. Reynolds entered cautiously, service weapon drawn, every sense alert for danger. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting long shadows across rusted machinery and graffiti-covered walls. The air smelled of mildew and decay. I'm here, he called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. Keep walking. Elijah's voice came from somewhere ahead. Straight ahead, through the main floor. Reynolds followed the instructions, making his way deeper into the factory until he reached what appeared to have once been a foreman's office, overlooking the production floor. Inside, a battery-powered lantern illuminated a makeshift command center, maps pinned to walls, surveillance photos, and at the center, Sergeant Boone tied to a chair, duct tape across his mouth. Elijah stood in the corner, watching Reynolds with those unnervingly calm eyes. You weren't followed? No, Reynolds replied, holstering his weapon. Took a roundabout route, doubled back twice. Elijah nodded approvingly. Good. We don't have much time. Reynolds gestured toward Boone, whose eyes were wide with fear and fury. What's the plan? With him, information, then leverage. Elijah approached Boone, removing the duct tape in one swift motion. Ready to talk, Sergeant? Boone spat at him. Go to hell, you psycho. You first. Elijah's tone hadn't changed, but something in his posture shifted subtly. Tell me about the shipment that was coming in tonight. What happened to the other children? The ones not at the terminal? I don't know what you're talking about, Boone insisted. Reynolds stepped forward, showing Boone his phone with video from the USB drive playing. We've seen the footage, Travis. It's over. The FBI is at the port right now finding exactly what you've been helping hide. Boone's face paled as he watched the video. I didn't know about the kids, he whispered. That wasn't part of the deal. What was the deal? Reynolds pressed. Money, protection. Look the other way while merchandise came through the port. Boone looked between them desperately. But I swear I thought it was drugs, maybe guns, not people, not kids. Elijah watched him impassively. The backup location. Where would Langston route the rest of his merchandise after the terminal was compromised? Boone hesitated, then slumped in defeat. The old meatpacking plant on River Street. It's been converted inside, holding cells, processing areas. That's where they sort the inventory. Reynolds felt sick at the clinical description. How many people are there? I don't know exactly. Guards, administrators, maybe 20, plus whatever inventory made it there before the terminal was. Hit. Elijah turned to Reynolds. Call it in. Anonymous tip to the FBI only, not local PD. Use one of the burner phones on the desk. As Reynolds made the call, Elijah prepared a syringe. Boone eyed it fearfully. What is that? What are you going to do to me? Insurance policy, Elijah replied, administering the injection with practiced efficiency. You're going back to Langston with a message. Boone's eyelids immediately began to droop. What message? You'll find out when you wake up, Elijah said as Boone lost consciousness. Reynolds finished his call and turned back to them. FBI's mobilizing to the meatpacking plant. ETA 15 minutes. He gestured to Boone. What now? Now we prepare for Langston's retaliation, Elijah replied, checking his weapons methodically. He's lost 2 major assets tonight. He'll be desperate, which makes him dangerous. You think he'll come after us directly? Not us. Elijah fixed Reynolds with a grave look. The people we care about. Reynolds's blood ran cold. Sarah, Emma. I've already arranged protection for them, Elijah assured him. An old teammate is watching your house, but we need to move them to a secure location. And Langston, I'm going to end this tonight. Elijah's expression remained neutral, but his eyes carried the weight of absolute certainty. One way or another, Victor Langston's personal residence was a modernist mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, surrounded by extensive grounds and state-of-the-art security. As dawn broke over the horizon, he stood on his balcony, watching the news helicopter, footage of FBI agents leading handcuffed men from the meatpacking plant. His empire was crumbling piece by piece. Years of careful construction, millions in bribes and infrastructure, all being dismantled by one man's vendetta. The glass doors slid open behind him. Weiss stepped onto the balcony, his expression grim. We found Boone, the mercenary reported, left in the parking garage of your downtown office, drugged but alive. And he had this taped to his chest. Weiss handed over a folded paper. Langston opened it to find a simple drawing, a sniper's crosshairs centered on a crude sketch of his house. Beneath it, 2 words. I'm coming. Crushing the paper in his fist, Langston turned to Weiss. Double the security. I want men on every approach, thermal scanners, motion detectors. If a squirrel crosses my property line, I want to know about it. Already done, Weiss assured him. My best men are positioning now. If Carter comes anywhere near this place, he's dead. What about our leverage? Team 2 is in position at Reynolds' house. On your word, they'll move in and secure the wife and kid. Langston nodded in satisfaction. Wait for my signal. Let's see if we can draw Carter out first. As Weiss departed, Langston stared back at the ocean, the paper still crumpled in his fist. He'd faced threats before. Rivals, authorities, even assassins. None had ever reached this far into his operation. None had ever made him feel vulnerable. But then, none had ever been Elijah Carter. From his vantage point on a hillside 2 miles from Langston's compound, Elijah observed the increased security through his scope. Mercenaries patrolled the perimeter in pairs, their movements professional and alert. Sniper positions had been established on the roof and in the guest house covering all approaches. Impressive, but expected. Weiss knew his business. Elijah's phone vibrated quietly. Reynolds, Sarah and Emma are secure, the officer reported. Your friend got them out just before Langston's men arrived. Casualties? None on our side. Your friend disabled 3 mercenaries, without firing a shot. Elijah allowed himself a small nod of approval. Bishop had always been good at close quarters work. What's the play now? Reynolds asked, tension evident in his voice. Stay with your family, Elijah instructed. I'm dealing with Langston. Alone? Against his entire security force? It's not the first impossible mission I've undertaken, Elijah replied calmly. But it will be Langston's last. He ended the call and returned to his observation. The security was formidable but followed predictable patterns. Weiss was expecting a frontal assault or a sniper approach, tactics that worked against conventional opponents. Elijah was anything but conventional. Packing his rifle, he retreated from his position and made his way to the equipment cache he'd established the previous day. Inside the waterproof container lay specialized gear, thermal masking clothing, signal jammers, and several packages of C4 explosives with remote detonators. Langston expected a hunter. Elijah would give him a ghost instead. Lieutenant Howard, Bishop, retired Delta Force, former teammate of Elijah Carter, and now private security consultant, watched over Reynolds and his family in a safe house 20 miles outside the city. The modest cabin belonged to another former operator who owed Bishop a favor. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her daughter asleep in her lap, while Reynolds paced nervously by the window. Will they be safe? Bishop asked, nodding toward Reynolds' family. If Carter succeeds, yes. Bishop checked his watch. If not, we have extraction plans ready. New identities, overseas relocation. Reynolds shook his head in disbelief. How did I get caught in the middle of all this? Wrong place, wrong time, Bishop replied matter-of-factly. Or right place, right time, depending on your perspective. Carter doesn't trust easily. If he brought you in, he saw something in you worth trusting. What's their history? Carter and Langston? Bishop considered the question carefully. 5 years ago, Langston was running weapons to terrorist cells in Eastern Europe. Carter was tasked with shutting down the operation. The mission parameters changed when intelligence discovered Langston had political protection. So Carter was called off? Officially, yes. Bishop's expression remained neutral. Unofficially, Carter made his own call. One shot, 1,600 meters, through a quarter-inch plate glass window. Langston's regional commander died instantly. The operation collapsed. And the government disavowed him, Reynolds guessed. Not exactly. They gave him a choice. Keep following orders that protected men like Langston, or walk away. He walked. Bishop checked his weapon methodically. Started hunting targets the government deemed untouchable. Men with money, power, political connections. Like Langston, Bishop nodded. Langston was always on his list. The question was when, not if. Reynolds looked out the window at the darkening sky. Will he survive this? Carter? Bishop's face betrayed a rare hint of emotion, something like pride mixed with resignation. He never planned to. Night fell over Langston's compound, bringing with it a dense coastal fog that rolled in from the ocean, enveloping the property in a ghostly shroud. The security team switched to thermal imaging and infrared, their visibility severely compromised despite their technology. Inside the main house, Langston paced his study, a glass of bourbon in one hand, a satellite phone in the other. His fallback plans were activated, private jet fueled and waiting, offshore accounts accessible, new identity documents prepared. If Carter somehow breached the perimeter, Langston would be gone before he reached the main house. Weiss entered without knocking, tension evident in his normally stoic demeanor. "We've lost contact with the northwestern perimeter team," he reported. "2 men. Radio check missed, no response to recall. Equipment failure?" Langston suggested without much hope. "Unlikely. Both men, same time?" Weiss shook his head. "He's here." Langston drained his bourbon. "How?" "The approach is completely monitored." "It's Carter," Weiss replied simply, as if that explained everything. "I've ordered full lockdown protocol. All teams converging on the house. We're establishing a defensive perimeter." "Meaning you're surrendering the grounds," Langston observed bitterly. "Meaning we're creating a kill zone," Weiss corrected. "Let him come to us, on our terms." A distant thud shook the windows, followed seconds later by the distinctive crack of a high-caliber rifle. Weiss's radio erupted with frantic chatter. "Sniper! East Ridge! Jackson's down! Return!" The transmission cut off abruptly. Weiss barked orders into his radio, directing teams to the eastern approach even as another explosion, closer this time, rattled the compound. "He's creating chaos," Weiss realized aloud. "Explosives on the perimeter, sniper fire from the ridge. He's making us divide our forces." "So stop falling for it," Langston snapped. "It's one man. One man who's managed to breach a secured perimeter. With 30 trained operators," Weiss retorted, his professional composure finally cracking. "This isn't a normal adversary." The lights throughout the compound suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness before emergency generators kicked, embathing everything in dim red auxiliary lighting. "Main power's cut," Weiss confirmed unnecessarily, checking his sidearm. "He's inside the perimeter." Langston moved to his desk, retrieving a sleek handgun from a hidden drawer. "Get me to the helipad. Now." Weiss hesitated, listening to the increasingly frantic reports coming through his earpiece. "It's not safe to move. We should stay here. Fortify our position." "I'm not paying you to cower in a corner," Langston snarled. "Get me out of here." Before Weiss could respond, all radio communications erupted with a single chilling message in a calm, measured voice they both recognized immediately. "I warned you. Now you're all dead men walking." Elijah Carter had hacked their communication system. Seconds later, a series of coordinated explosions rocked the compound, systematically taking out the defensive positions Weiss had established. The mercenary commander stared at Langston, genuine fear finally breaking through his professional facade. "God help us," he whispered. Outside, cloaked in the fog and darkness, Elijah moved like a wraith through the chaos he had orchestrated. The perimeter explosives, small, precisely placed charges, had been the first phase, designed to draw attention and resources outward. The sniper fire from a remotely controlled rifle platform on the eastern ridge had further divided their forces. Now, as the compound's defenses collapsed into disarray, he breached the main house through a service entrance, systematically eliminating the security personnel he encountered. Each movement was economical, each kill precise, a knife across a throat here, a silenced shot there. He left no witnesses, no wounded to raise alarms. His mind remained cold, calculating, assessing threats and opportunities with machine-like efficiency. This wasn't personal, despite the history. This was a mission, his last perhaps, but executed, with the same precision as every operation he'd ever undertaken. The mansion's interior was a maze of opulence, marble floors, priceless artwork, crystal chandeliers now dark in the power outage. Elijah navigated by memory, having studied the building plans for weeks. Langston would be in one of 3 locations, his study, the panic room in the master suite, or heading for the helipad on the eastern terrace. A squad of 4 mercenaries blocked the main staircase, positioned behind overturned furniture with clear fields of fire. Elijah assessed and dismissed a frontal approach. Instead, he retreated to the kitchen, finding the dumbwaiter shaft that connected to the upper floor. Narrow but manageable. 2 minutes later, he emerged behind the mercenary position, silent as death itself. 4 men died before they realized he was there. Elijah continued upward, toward the master suite where Langston's panic room was located. The hallway was empty, a tactical error that confirmed his suspicion. They were evacuating. The helipad, then. Reynolds paced the safe house anxiously, checking his phone for updates. Nothing since Elijah's last message 2 hours ago. Beginning. Final approach. Bishop monitored police and emergency channels on a specialized radio, his expression growing increasingly concerned as reports of explosions and gunfire at Langston's estate filtered through. "It started," he announced grimly. Sarah looked up from where she sat with Emma, fear evident in her eyes. "Will he be okay?" Bishop exchanged a look with Reynolds, both men knowing better than to offer false hope. "Carter doesn't go into battles. He can't win," Bishop said carefully, "but winning doesn't always mean walking away." Reynolds' phone suddenly buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. "Reynolds," he answered tensely. "Officer Reynolds." The voice wasn't Elijah's, but refined, cultured with an edge of desperation. "Langston, I believe we have mutual interest to discuss." Reynolds put the phone on speaker, signaling Bishop. "I have nothing to say to you." "Then perhaps you'd prefer to listen," Langston replied. "Your friend Carter has made quite a mess of my home. Tonight. Killed quite a few of my employees. He's very determined to reach me." "Sounds like your problem." "It's about to become yours," Langston's voice hardened. "Because while he's been hunting me, my men have been hunting too. We know about your wife, Sarah, your daughter, Emma. We know they're not at home, but we will find them." Reynolds felt ice in his veins. "If you touch them, that depends entirely on you." Langston interrupted. "Call Carter off. Now. Tell him if he wants your family to live, he backs away." Bishop was already on his feet, signaling for Sarah to gather Emma. His expression confirmed Reynolds' worst fear. Somehow their location had been compromised. "He won't stop," Reynolds said, playing for time. "Not for me, not for anyone." Then, "Their blood is on your hands." The line went dead. Reynolds turned to Bishop, panic rising. "We need to move. Now." Bishop was already checking the perimeter through specialized equipment. "Too late," he said grimly. "They're already here." Elijah reached the terrace access point just as Weiss and 3 remaining mercenaries escorted Langston toward the waiting helicopter. The fog had thinned slightly, allowing the aircraft's running lights to cut through the darkness. Taking cover behind a decorative planter, Elijah assessed the situation. Langston walked in the center of the formation, partially shielded by his guards. The pilot was already in the helicopter, rotors beginning to turn. Elijah raised his rifle, calculating trajectory and wind correction. One shot to disable the helicopter, targeting the main rotor assembly, would ground it permanently. Then pick off the guards methodically, saving Langston for last. His finger tightened on the trigger. The phone in his pocket vibrated, the secure line only Reynolds had the number to. Without lowering his weapon, Elijah answered. "Not now. Carter, they have them." Reynolds' voice was ragged with fear. "Langston's men found the safe house. They've got Sarah and Emma." Elijah's focus shifted instantly, tactical priorities recalculating. "Bishop?" "Fighting them off, but we're outgunned. There's too many." Through the phone, Elijah could hear gunfire, a child crying in terror, a woman's desperate attempt to comfort her. Langston called. Reynolds continued rapidly. "Said to tell you to back off, or they die." Elijah watched through his scope as Langston reached the helicopter, 1 foot on the skid, turning to scan the darkness one last time, as if he sensed Elijah's presence. Their eyes met across the distance, the predator and his prey, locked in a final moment of recognition. "Are you in position to confirm Langston's location?" Reynolds asked desperately. Elijah's finger hovered over the trigger. One shot would end it all, complete his mission, eliminate the threat, bring down the empire he'd been hunting for years, at the cost of a woman and child he'd never met. "Carter, are you there?" "I'm here," Elijah replied, lowering his rifle as Langston disappeared into the helicopter, the aircraft rising into the fog. "Langston's escaping. Give me the safe house location." As Reynolds rattled off the address, Elijah was already moving, calculating routes and timing. The safe house was 20 miles away. The helicopter would reach it in minutes. By road, even at maximum speed, he'd never make it in time. Unless... Elijah sprinted through the compound, ignoring the remaining mercenaries who were more focused on survival than pursuit. He reached the garage, finding what he'd hoped for. A sleek, high-performance motorcycle. "Reynolds, keep them fighting as long as possible," he instructed, hot-wiring the vehicle with practiced ease. "Tell Bishop I'm inbound. ETA 17 minutes. "They won't last 17 minutes. Then we better hope Langston wants to gloat before he gives the kill order." The motorcycle roared to life beneath him. "Stay alive. I'm coming." Elijah accelerated down the winding driveway, pushing the powerful machine to its limits. Above him, barely visible through the fog, Langston's helicopter banked eastward, heading for the safe house. The hunt had changed direction, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The motorcycle roared through the empty country roads, headlight cutting, through the darkness as Elijah pushed the machine to its mechanical limits. Trees and fields blurred past, his mind calculating distances, angles, probabilities, the familiar mathematics of combat and survival. Above, barely visible against the night sky, Langston's helicopter maintained its course toward the safe house. The aircraft had the advantage of speed and direct route, but Elijah knew these back roads intimately, had memorized them during his initial planning, always preparing for contingencies. His earpiece crackled with Bishop's voice, the sounds of gunfire in the background. "Carter, situation critical. East and west approaches compromised. 8 hostiles, possibly more in reserve. Reynolds, his family, secure in the basement panic room. For now." Bishop's voice was strained, professional calm giving way to urgency. "We need immediate assistance." 5 minutes out, Elijah replied, leaning lower over the motorcycle's fuel tank as he took a sharp curve at dangerous speed. "Hold position. Negative. Perimeter breach imminent. I'm implementing Protocol 7. Elijah's expression hardened. "Protocol 7, last stand defense." Bishop was preparing to sacrifice himself to buy time. "Negative on Protocol 7, Elijah." Commanded. "Maintain defensive posture only." "Too late, brother." Bishop's voice softened briefly. "Just get them out." The line went silent as Elijah crested a hill, the safe house finally coming into view in the valley below. The modest cabin was illuminated by muzzle flashes and the harsh beams of tactical flashlights as dark figures converged on it from multiple angles. On the far side of the property, Langston's helicopter was touching down in a cleared area. Elijah cut the motorcycle's engine and lights, letting momentum carry him down the hill as he assessed the tactical situation. 8 mercenaries visible from his vantage point, divided into 3 teams with more likely inside the helicopter with Langston. Bishop had established defensive positions at the cabin's windows, sporadic gunfire indicating he was still active. But the mercenaries were advancing methodically, using coordinated fire and movement techniques to close in on the structure. Professional, disciplined, deadly. Elijah dismounted, unslinging his rifle in one fluid motion. No time for complex strategies or careful planning. This would be raw combat, the kind of direct assault he typically avoided. Sighting through his scope, he targeted the nearest mercenary team leader, exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The suppressed rifle coughed once, the mercenary dropping without a sound. Before his companions could react, Elijah had already shifted position and fired twice more. 3 down in 6 seconds. The remaining mercenaries immediately scattered, seeking cover and trying to locate the new threat. Their momentary confusion gave Elijah the opening he needed to advance, moving from shadow to shadow with predatory grace. Inside the cabin, Bishop had registered the changing pattern of fire outside. Someone was engaging the mercenaries from behind, and there was only one person it could be. "Carter's here," he called down to Reynolds in the basement panic room. "Engaging hostiles from the northwest perimeter." Reynolds checked his weapon, glancing at Sarah, who held Emma tightly against her chest, the little girl's face buried in her mother's shoulder. "Stay here," he told them firmly. "No matter what you hear, don't open this door for anyone but me, or Elijah." Sarah nodded, fear and determination mingling in her eyes. "Be careful," Reynolds climbed the stairs to rejoin Bishop at the defensive position. The former Delta operator had taken a bullet to the shoulder, but remained combat effective. His movements precise despite the blood soaking his tactical vest. "What's the plan?" Reynolds asked, taking position at an adjacent window. "Carter's creating an external diversion," Bishop explained, firing a controlled burst toward a mercenary attempting to flank their position. "We maintain defensive coverage. Until he—" The front door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke, 3 armored figures rushing through the breach. Bishop pivoted instantly, dropping the first intruder with a headshot while Reynolds fired frantically at the others. The Thor. Confined space erupted into chaos. Muzzle flashes, shouted commands, the impact of bullets against furniture and walls. Reynolds felt something hot graze his arm but kept firing, training and adrenaline overriding the pain. Bishop advanced toward the breach point, tactical light momentarily blinding the second mercenary, before a 3-round burst ended his attack. The third attacker managed to duck behind an overturned table, returning fire with precision. "Grenade!" Bishop shouted, spotting the small object rolling across the floor toward them. He lunged forward, covering the explosive with his body just as it detonated. The concussion threw Reynolds against the wall, ears ringing, vision blurred. Through the smoke and confusion, he saw Bishop lying motionless, the lower half of his body devastated by the blast. The remaining mercenary was rising from cover, weapon trained on Reynolds. A shadow materialized from the smoke behind the attacker, Elijah, moving with lethal purpose. The mercenary never had time to turn. A combat knife flashed once and he collapsed, blood pumping from a severed carotid artery. Elijah was beside Bishop in an instant, checking for life signs with clinical detachment. Finding none, he closed his former teammate's eyes with a brief, almost imperceptible gesture of respect before turning to Reynolds. "Your family?" "Basement panic room," Reynolds managed, struggling to his feet. "Safe." "Not for long," Elijah replied, retrieving Bishop's weapon and spare magazines. This was just the advance team. Langston's approaching from the east with his primary security detail. As if to confirm his assessment, a spotlight from the helicopter swept across the cabin's windows, bathing the interior in harsh white light. "Reynolds!" Langston's amplified voice boomed from outside. "Send Carter out and your family lives. You have 30 seconds to comply." Elijah checked his ammunition, features calm despite the ultimatum. "Get to the panic room. There's a secondary exit, maintenance tunnel leading to an underground storm shelter 50 yards east. Coordinates are programmed into Bishop's sat phone. What about you?" "I'll handle Langston." Elijah's tone left no room for discussion. "He's got at least 6 men with him," Reynolds argued, "plus whatever backup is in the helicopter. Go, now." Elijah moved toward the front of the cabin, positioning himself strategically. "Your family needs you." Reynolds hesitated, torn between duty and survival. "Carter." This was always how it would end, Elijah said quietly, the closest he'd come to revealing emotion. "My choice. My mission." Understanding passed between the men, the silent acknowledgement that sometimes victory required sacrifice. "Thank you," Reynolds said simply, then turned and hurried toward the basement stairs. Outside, Langston's patience was wearing thin. 10 seconds, Reynolds. Send him out or we come in shooting. Elijah took a deep breath, centering himself as he had before countless operations. One final mission, one last kill, 5 seconds. Moving to the shattered doorway, Elijah called out calmly, "Langston, I'm coming out." A tense silence followed, broken only by the whirring of the helicopter's idling rotors. "Unarmed," Langston finally responded. "Hands where I can see them." Elijah placed his primary weapons on the floor, but kept a combat knife concealed at the small of his back. Hands raised, he stepped through the doorway into the harsh spotlight. 6 mercenaries formed a semicircle around the cabin entrance, weapons trained on his position. Behind them stood Langston, a satisfied smile playing across his features. "The legendary Elijah Carter," Langston called out, staying safely behind his human shield of operatives. Finally, face to face. "We've met before," Elijah replied evenly, eyes scanning for weaknesses in the formation. "Eastern Europe. You were running weapons to terrorist cells." And you put a bullet through my regional commander's skull from over a mile away. Langston nodded. Impressive shot. Cost me millions. Not enough, apparently. Langston's smile tightened. Where are Reynolds and his family? Gone. Beyond your reach. I doubt that. Langston nodded to one of his men. Check the house. Find them. Two mercenaries peeled away from the formation, moving cautiously toward the cabin. Elijah tracked their movement without turning his head, calculating odds, distances, reaction times. 4 remaining guards plus Langston. Acceptable. You've been thorough, Langston continued. My shipping operation exposed, my reputation compromised, my home destroyed. You've cost me everything. Not quite everything, Elijah replied. Not yet. Something in his tone made Langston step back instinctively. Kill him, he ordered sharply. The mercenaries opened fire simultaneously, a coordinated volley that would have shredded any normal target. But Elijah was already moving, dropping and rolling with inhuman speed as bullets tore through the space where he had stood moments before. The knife was in his hand before he completed the roll, flashing upward, into the first mercenary's femoral artery. Blood sprayed in a pulsing arc as Elijah wrenched the weapon free, pivoting toward the next target. What followed was a deadly ballet of violence, precise, efficient, almost beautiful in its terrible perfection. Elijah flowed between the remaining mercenaries like water, each movement leading seamlessly into the next kill. A dislocated elbow here, a crushed trachea there, the knife finding vulnerable points with surgical accuracy. In 12 seconds, 4 highly trained killers lay dead or dying, and Elijah stood facing Langston, bloody knife in hand. Langston backed away, fumbling for the pistol at his waist. Stay back. You should have left me alone, Elijah said, advancing steadily. I warned you, all of you. The crime lord managed to draw his weapon, firing wildly. One bullet grazed Elijah's shoulder, another tore through his side, but he didn't slow, didn't flinch, just kept coming with the relentless certainty of death itself. Langston turned to flee toward the helicopter, but Elijah was on him in 3 swift strides, catching him by the collar and driving the knife between his ribs with enough force to lift him momentarily off his feet. This is for the children, Elijah whispered, twisting the blade deeper. Langston's eyes widened with shock and pain, his gun falling from nerveless fingers as Elijah lowered him to the ground. Blood bubbled from his lips as he tried to speak, managing only a weak, gurgling cough. Don't try to talk, Elijah advised dispassionately. Punctured lung. You have about 3 minutes. From the cabin came shouted obscenities and the sound of gunfire. The 2 mercenaries Langston had sent to find Reynolds' family encountering unexpected resistance, leaving Langston to his inevitable fate. Elijah retrieved a fallen mercenary's weapon and moved swiftly back toward the cabin. Inside, he found an unexpected scene. Reynolds crouched behind an overturned couch, exchanging fire with the remaining mercenary, who had taken position in the kitchen doorway. I thought I told you to evacuate, Elijah noted calmly, positioning himself for a clear shot. Sarah and Emma are away, Reynolds replied, ducking as bullets splintered the wood above his head. Couldn't leave you to clean up my mess. Admirable. Foolish, but admirable. With practiced precision, Elijah fired a single shot that caught the mercenary in the exposed portion of his skull, ending the firefight instantly. Reynolds emerged cautiously from cover, surveying the destruction around them. Langston? Dead or dying, Elijah confirmed, pressing a hand against the wound in his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, but his expression remained unchanged. The others? His pilot tried to run when the shooting started. I incapacitated him. Elijah nodded approval. We should move. More will come when they lose contact. You need medical attention, Reynolds observed, noticing the spreading bloodstain on Elijah's shirt. Later. First, we ensure your family reaches safety. Elijah moved toward the door, his gait betraying the slightest hint of unsteadiness. The FBI contact I established earlier, Director Sawyer. Call him. Only him. Tell him Langston's organization has been decapitated, but the network remains. Outside, Langston lay motionless beside the helicopter, eyes staring sightlessly at the stars. Elijah spared him a single glance before continuing toward the tree line where Reynolds had directed his family. "It's over," Reynolds said, following close behind. "We won." Elijah's expression remained unchanged as he scanned the darkness ahead. This battle, perhaps. The war continues. 3 days later, the story dominated national headlines. FBI raids uncover massive human trafficking network. Billionaire businessman Victor Langston killed in confrontation. Dozens of officials implicated in corruption probe. In a secure hospital room under federal protection, Reynolds sat beside Elijah's bed, watching the news coverage on a muted television. The legendary operative had survived surgery to remove 2 bullets and repair significant internal damage, though the doctors warned his recovery would be lengthy. "They're calling it the biggest human trafficking bust in history," Reynolds commented. 15 separate locations raided simultaneously, hundreds of victims rescued. Elijah's eyes remained closed, his breathing steady but shallow. The machines monitoring his vital signs beeped rhythmically. "Director Sawyer came by earlier," Reynolds continued. "Said to tell you the package is secure. I'm guessing that means Sarah and Emma made it to the safe location." Still no response. The doctors had warned that Elijah was drifting in and out of consciousness, his body focused on healing from trauma that would have killed most men. Reynolds leaned closer. "I don't know if you can hear me, but thank you for everything. You saved my family, saved me from becoming what Boone was." He thought he detected the slightest change in Elijah's breathing, perhaps an acknowledgement. "They want me to testify about Langston, the trafficking, the corruption in the department, witness protection after, new identities for all of us." Reynolds shook his head in disbelief. "Never thought I'd end up here when I became a cop." The door opened quietly as Director Sawyer entered, his expression grave. The tall, silver-haired FBI veteran nodded respectfully toward Elijah's still form before addressing Reynolds. "How is he?" "Stable. Fighting." "Good. He's going to need his strength." Sawyer handed Reynolds a sealed folder. "This just came through intelligence channels. We were right. Langston was just one piece of a much larger organization." Reynolds opened the folder, finding surveillance photos and classified briefings detailing an international network that extended far beyond Langston's operation. "The Revenant Order," he read aloud. "What is this?" "A shadow network spanning multiple countries. Arms dealing, human trafficking, political assassinations, all connected through shell companies and offshore accounts." Sawyer gestured to the bed. "Carter's been hunting them for years, piece by piece. Langston was just the latest target." Reynolds digested this, suddenly understanding the larger context of what he'd been caught up in. "And now?" "Now the real work begins." Sawyer collected the folder. "When he wakes up, tell him Wolf is involved. He'll understand." After the director left, Reynolds sat in silence, contemplating how his life had changed so completely in less than a week. From rookie cop to federal witness, from bystander to participant in a shadow war, he was only beginning to comprehend. On the bed, Elijah's eyes opened suddenly, alert and focused despite his weakened state. "Carter, you're awake." "Wolf," Elijah said, his voice hoarse but determined. "Victor Wolf." Reynolds nodded. Sawyer mentioned him, part of something called the Revenant Order. Elijah's expression hardened, a familiar coldness entering his eyes. Adrian's brother. Adrian, a target, years ago. Elijah's hand tightened on the bed rail, knuckles white with tension. Victor swore revenge. Reynolds understood immediately. This wasn't over. The battle with Langston had been just one skirmish in a much larger conflict. "You need to rest," he advised. "Recover your strength." "No time," Elijah replied, already attempting to sit up despite the medical equipment monitoring. "Him. The order will regroup. Adapt. We need to move now." "We?" Reynolds asked cautiously. Elijah's gaze locked with his, evaluating, assessing. "You've proven yourself. Made your choice. If you want out, now's the time." The offer hung between them, a return to normal life or continuation down a path few would willingly choose. Reynolds thought of his family, of Bishop's sacrifice, of the children rescued from Langston's shipping containers. "I'm in," he said firmly. "Whatever comes next, I'm in." For the first time since they'd met, Elijah Carter smiled, a brief, subtle expression that vanished almost immediately but nonetheless genuine. "Then we have work to do." 4 months later, Reynolds stood on the porch of a modest suburban home, watching his daughter play in the fenced backyard. Emma's laughter carried on the warm spring breeze as she chased a butterfly through carefully tended flower beds. Their new life seemed idyllic on the surface. New names, new history, new beginning. The federal marshals had done their job thoroughly, creating a convincing backstory and relocating them far from their previous life. To neighbors, they were the Mitchells, Mark, a security consultant, his wife Lisa, and their daughter Amy. Sarah, now Lisa, emerged from the house carrying 2 coffee mugs. "Beautiful day," she commented, handing one to Reynolds. "Perfect," he agreed, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Any word?" She glanced around instinctively before answering. "Package arrived this morning, in your office." Reynolds nodded, sipping his coffee to maintain the casual appearance of their conversation. After months of living under constant surveillance, certain habits became ingrained. Never discuss sensitive topics openly, always check for watchers, maintain the cover at all times. Inside his home office, a simple cardboard box sat on the desk. No return address, no postal markings, delivered through channels outside normal mail services. Reynolds opened it carefully, finding a military challenge coin nestled in protective packaging, along with a USB drive labeled, "For your eyes only." The coin was heavyweight, embossed with insignia he didn't recognize, some special forces unit that officially didn't exist. He pocketed it before inserting the USB drive into his secure laptop. The screen displayed a single video file. Reynolds clicked play, and Elijah Carter's face appeared, healthy now. The hospital pallor replaced by the weathered complexion of a man who spent time outdoors. He sat in what appeared to be a bunker or secure room, dim lighting casting shadows across his features. "Reynolds," Elijah began without preamble. "I told you I was done. I lied. There's more work to do." The video continued as Elijah outlined what they'd discovered in the months since Langston's fall, how the trafficking network had been just one tentacle of the Revenant Order, how the organization had already adapted to the loss, shifting operations, and protecting key assets. "Langston was expendable," Elijah explained, his tone matter-of-fact. "A visible front for an invisible organization. We cut off one head, but the Hydra lives." The video ended, and another file automatically opened. A classified military dossier detailing the Revenant Order's structure, activities, and suspected leadership. Intelligence reports suggested connections to government officials, military contractors, and international financial institutions. At the center of it all, a name: Victor Wolf. Reynolds studied the accompanying photograph, a tall, aristocratic man with cold eyes that reminded him eerily of Elijah's predatory gaze. The resemblance to his brother Adrian was subtle but undeniable. The phone rang, startling Reynolds from his review. A blocked number. He answered cautiously. "Mitchell. Window. 3, 2 minutes." The line went dead. Reynolds moved to the third window in his office, peering through the blinds at precisely the 2-minute mark. A black SUV idled at the curb, the passenger door opening in clear invitation. "Sarah," he called, maintaining their cover names out of habit. "I'm heading out for a bit, work call." She appeared in the doorway, understanding immediately from his expression. "How long?" "Not sure." "Don't wait up." 5 minutes later, Reynolds sat in the back of the SUV as it drove smoothly through suburban streets toward an unknown destination. The driver remained silent, focused on navigating through traffic with professional efficiency. After nearly an hour, they arrived at a private airstrip where a military transport plane waited, engines already running. The driver finally spoke. As Reynolds exited the vehicle, "They're waiting for you." Inside the aircraft, Reynolds found Elijah engaged in conversation with a gray-haired man whose posture screamed military despite his civilian attire. Both looked up as Reynolds approached. "Right on time," the older man noted approvingly. "I'm Colonel Briggs. You must be Reynolds." "Former Colonel," Elijah corrected mildly. "Officially retired 3 years ago. Some jobs you never really retire." Briggs shrugged, offering his hand to Reynolds. "Good to finally meet you. Carter speaks highly of your performance during the Langston operation." Coming from Elijah, Reynolds knew that qualified as effusive praise. "Thank you, sir." "Take a seat," Briggs instructed as the plane's door sealed shut and the engines increased power. "We have a lot to cover before we reach the facility." Reynolds buckled into a seat beside Elijah. "What facility?" "Home base," Elijah replied simply. "Where we plan, train, and deploy." As the aircraft lifted off, Briggs activated a secure tablet, displaying satellite imagery of a mountainous region marked with surveillance annotations. "For the past decade, we've been tracking and disrupting the Revenant Order's operations," the colonel explained. "Small-scale interventions mostly, surgical strikes against key personnel, targeted intelligence gathering, asset seizure. Carter's work against Langston was our biggest victory to date," he continued, "but it's accelerated their timetable. They're consolidating power, eliminating loose ends, preparing for something significant." "What exactly is the Revenant Order?" Reynolds asked, studying the satellite images. Elijah mentioned they're connected to arms dealing, human trafficking. "They're an evolution of traditional criminal enterprises," Briggs interrupted. "Founded by former intelligence operatives, special forces, and black operations specialists, who decided their skills were more profitable in the private sector. Mercenaries? At first. But they've grown into something far more dangerous. A stateless, ideologically flexible organization that sells destruction to the highest bidder. Regime change, assassination, terrorism, whatever the market demands." Reynolds glanced at Elijah, who sat silently, his expression unreadable. "And Victor Wolf runs this organization?" "After his brother's death, Victor assumed full control," Briggs confirmed. "He's brilliant, ruthless, and now personally motivated to destroy Carter. Because Elijah killed his brother." "Adrian Wolf was their top operative," Elijah spoke finally. "Trained him myself years ago, before he went rogue." The aircraft banked sharply, beginning its descent toward what appeared to be wilderness below. Through the window, Reynolds could make out the outline of structures built into the mountainside, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. "Welcome to Echo Base," Briggs announced as they touched down on a camouflaged runway. "Officially, it doesn't exist. Neither do we." Inside the mountain facility, Reynolds was struck by the contrast between the rugged exterior and the high-tech operation within. Command centers with wall-to-wall monitors displayed global intelligence feeds. Analysts worked at secure terminals, processing information from field operatives. A separate wing housed training facilities, armories, and medical units. Briggs led them to a secure briefing room where a dozen operatives waited, men and women with the unmistakable bearing of veteran special forces. Their expressions registered recognition as Elijah entered, respect mixed with something approaching awe. "The team," Briggs explained to Reynolds, "best of the best, recruited from every branch of special operations. Many worked with Carter before." 1. The main screen. A map displayed locations highlighted across the globe. Suspected Revenant Order facilities, safe houses, financial hubs. "Victor Wolf has gone to ground," Briggs continued, addressing the assembled team. "But recent intelligence suggests he's consolidating forces at this location." He indicated a remote compound in Eastern Europe. "Our objective is confirmation followed by full tactical response." "This isn't just about Wolf," Elijah added, studying the map intently. "The entire command structure will be present. One operation, one chance to decapitate the organization completely." Reynolds felt the weight of what was being proposed. Not just a mission, but a full-scale secret war against a global criminal network. He had expected to provide intelligence from the Langston operation, not to be included in whatever came next. "Where do I fit in all this?" he asked finally. "You've proven yourself adaptable, reliable under pressure, and committed to the cause," Briggs replied. "Qualities we need. The question is whether you're prepared to go further down this path. Elijah met Reynolds' gaze directly. This isn't like before. Before you were protecting your family, your city. This is different. Global stakes, higher risks, no recognition, no guarantees. And my family? Permanent security, best education. For your daughter, financial stability, Briggs assured him. Whether you're with us or not, they'll be protected. That's non-negotiable. Reynolds considered this, thinking of Sarah and Emma, of the life they'd begun to build in their new identity. They were safe now, happy even. Could he risk that for another mission? Another fight? Then he thought of the children from Langston's, containers of Bishop's sacrifice, of all the lives still affected by the Revenant Order's operations. Some choices once made couldn't be unmade. I'm in, he said finally. All the way. Elijah nodded once, a gesture that conveyed both approval and acknowledgement of the weight of Reynolds' decision. Then gear up, Briggs ordered, activating the detailed mission brief on the main screen. Wheels up in 6 hours, we're taking the fight to them. As the team dispersed to prepare, Reynolds found himself standing beside Elijah at the tactical map, studying the approach vectors to Wolf's compound. You knew I'd say yes, Reynolds observed. I knew you'd make the right choice, Elijah corrected. Whatever that was. Is this personal for you? Because of Adrian Wolf? Elijah considered the question with his characteristic detachment. It's a mission, like any other. But something in his eyes, a cold intensity that hadn't been there before, told Reynolds otherwise. This wasn't just another operation. This was the culmination of years of hunting, the final confrontation with an enemy who had made things decidedly personal. We'll get him, Reynolds promised. Yes, Elijah agreed, checking the specialized sniper rifle prepared for him by the armory staff. We will. Outside the facility, night was falling over the mountains, stars emerging in the clear sky. Somewhere across the world, Victor Wolf was preparing his own operations, unaware that the most lethal operative in Special Forces history was once again on his trail. The hunter had become the hunted, and then the hunter once more. The war had just begun. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more heart-pounding tales of redemption and retribution.